Welcome to Conversations, Lehman College's series of discussions with major theater figures of our time. Our guest today for the second of a two-part chat is my old friend and one of America's most gifted and appreciated stage directors, Marshall W. Mason. Welcome to the show, Marshall.
Thanks,
Welcome
Bill.
back.
Thank you.
We stopped last time with the founding of Circle Rep at a party. What happened?
Well, we had been introduced to this space, which is on the Upper West Side at 83rd and Broadway, by a fellow named Dr. Harry Lerner. And he was the head of an organization called the Metropolitan Area Council for International Culture and Lifelong Education, Recreation and Lifelong Education.
Oh my God.
Which spells CIRCLE.
Okay.
And so we had called ourselves the American Theater Project. And Dr. Lerner said, well, if you're going to occupy my space, you need to change your name to the Circle Theater. And we said, oh my God, we'll be confused with Circle in the Square for the rest of our lives. And we were. But we eventually came to be known, of course, as Circle Rep. But that, in the fall of 1969, Rob and I began to teach workshops. I taught one called Methods, and his was Exploration, because we were trying to cover both traditional plays that Stanislavski and the Moscow Art would have done, and wildly experimental plays such as Grotowski-based exploration. And in January of 1970, we did our first production, which was David Starkweather's, this was the era of long titles, you understand, and he wrote a play which we first did called A Practical Ritual to Exercise Frustration After 5 Days of Rain. And it was a contemporary story of Noah and his sons. And I followed that. Rob Thurkill directed the first production. I followed that with two productions of Chekhov's Three Sisters in rotating rep, one of which was a traditional production, the way Chekhov has always done, only somewhat better, I have to say. And the second, alternating with it every night, was an experimental production. And to the best of my knowledge, this was the first time anybody had ever done Chekhov experimentally. We had a big A-frame ladder on stage, and there were no props, and we just really told the story in contemporary terms. 4 students had just been shot at Kent State by our own National Guard, and so it was a time of political excitement and commitment. And the play seemed to really express that very, very nicely. Joe Butler, who was the drummer for The Loving Spoonful, played Vershinin, and he came out and would light a joint and say, "Imagine what it's going to be like 100 years from now," And it was really cool. And the young kids really related to the play in a way that I don't think they would have otherwise. And for the older people, they came on alternate nights and saw the traditional production, which was my favorite as well. The idea of the theater, what we were trying to accomplish, was to create an acting company that was trained in both the classics and prepared to do new plays, and to have a company of writers who would write specifically for the actors in the company, in the same way that Shakespeare wrote for the Lord Chamberlain's Players, Richard Burbage specifically, and Will Camp and others, in the way that Chekhov wrote specifically for the Moscow Art Theater once it was founded, and married the leading actress, that sort of thing. Molière had written for his own company, and so forth. But this was a time-honored way of doing theater which had been completely neglected for many, many years. The group theater was the only one in America that came close to this kind of artistic theater in this century.
Basically, you realized your ambitions. You did create an ensemble theater for quite a number of years. How long did the Circle Rep last? It was from
28 years, I believe. It's 27 or 28.
That's a very long time for a theater company.
Yeah, I was artistic director for the first 18 years.
Right.
And that was, sort of the golden era of Circle Rep, although it continued to have great success even after I left to mistakenly go to Hollywood and try to pursue a film career. During that time, we did have, you mentioned some of the writers. There was also people like Jules Feiffer, was attracted to the theater as a result, and Murray Schiskell, all kinds of writers, as well as David Mamet, Sam Shepard, and Marsha
Vogel.
Norman, Paula Vogel. You know, it's really a remarkable team of creativity.
Joe Mantello started to direct.
Joe Mantello began directing at Circle Rep and also acted in the Baltimore Waltz. Yeah.
It was really a magical time, and of course, eventually you did my play As Is.
Yeah, our first great success was really in 1973. We did a production of a new play called The Hot Owl Baltimore by Lanford Wilson.
That was a huge hit.
It was a huge success. We moved it off Broadway, where it ran for, I think, almost 1,200 performances and several years. And it won the New York Drama Critics Circle Award. And suddenly, I was part of the same history that I had learned about when I was in high school,
right,
because it was featured in the best plays. And I said, oh my God, we've made it, you know. And then after that, our first Broadway production was Jules Feiffer's Knock Knock, which moved to Broadway. And I opened, my debut on Broadway was on my birthday, February 24th, 1976.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a great night. And I was nominated for a Tony right away at the on my first outing. It was a wonderful period of time. Subsequently, Circle Rep did a great many wonderful plays. Mark Medoff, James Irwin, who later turned out to be Ed Moore, and his play The Seahorse. We did 3 plays within the first 12 months, all of which moved to big commercial runs off Broadway. And the New York Times did a huge front page article in the Arts and Leisure section saying, finally, real plays about real people.
I remember 2 of my favorite productions were The Mound Builders and what year was The Mound Builders?
Mound Builders was 1975.
It was very powerful to me. We have a wonderful clip from that, which I thought we'd show.
Great.
Could you roll them?
We're taking suggestions, putting them in a hat.
But then you just pull it out like a rabbit. It's no more important to you than that.
Well, we figure when we have an honest-to-God kid with a gender, we'll think of something.
Boy, you guys are super cool down here in the sticks. You got your little harem of ugly girl students hanging around you on a string, watching every little brush stroke and picking pride like you was painting the world's last masterpiece. You got your pretty wives and your kids and your dope addict sister. Cynthia says you're going to be getting write-ups in Time magazine.
I said Croft envisions his mug on the cover.
You got the university paying your room and board. You got the place tied up so everything you find belongs to them. You're really knocking it.
That's the agreement your father signed.
You really got it knocked. You're finding all these old battle weapons. Just look at the craftsmanship on that. What'd you call that? Said that was a spear point? You'd think those old boys would have the tools to make something
That's
like that.
very dangerous.
Didn't you say you had to be somewhere?
Hell, you don't even need. You can break somebody's neck just by putting the right twist in the right place. You know that?
I'm sure you could.
Boy, I really admire you're all super cool. It's a damn shame you're gonna have to find yourself some other field operation.
That, of course, was starring Brad Dourif, Tanya Berezin, Rob Thurkiel, Trish Hawkins, Stephanie Gordon, Jonathan Hogan. These was core members of your repertory
Yes,
company.
they were. We worked so many times with the same, these wonderful actors over and over again. And John Hogan particularly was in virtually everything from Hot Owl Baltimore right through to Burn This.
Right.
And eventually A Book of Days, which we, as our Lanford, my
As Is
latest
as well.
production, yeah. So Hogan has been throughout. Tanya, of course, many productions. Same thing for Stephanie, and it was a great company, great actors. Probably the most prominent of our actors for a long time was William Hurt. I did Hamlet with William, and we did that in rotating rep with Mary Stuart, which Tanya Berezin and Stephanie Gordon played the 2 warring British queens. And subsequently, Romulus Linney's play Child Byron,
Right.
which starred Bill
Wonderful
Hurt
play.
opposite Lindsay Krause, and introduced a young actor named John Dossett, who has become quite a wonderful Broadway star now. So we had wonderful, wonderful writers writing wonderful plays for us, and because the Circle Rep was such an intimate space, it was only 160 seats, but a very large stage, but a very small audience. And as a result of that, many of our actors, they had to develop such a complete reality to be on stage, and that's really what I talk about in my book, how to get that kind of reality where you're just living on stage rather than acting, you know. And as a result of that, so many of them went on to great success in films, particularly William Hurt and Jeff Daniels, and who was so wonderful in The Squid and the Whale this year, really a terrific performance. And Mary McDonnell and Kathy Baitz,
Right.
you know, Academy
These are all
Award
Circle
winners.
Rep folk. And,
Yeah, yeah, it was great.
Later, a little later, you developed the Talley, Lanford Wilson's Talley trilogy. And what was that process like?
Well, the first one he wrote was 5th of July, and we had just been introduced to William Hurt by Corrine Jacker, who knew him, and he starred first in the play of hers called My Life, and then, which also starred Christopher Reeve. And Chris actually got
Superman,
cast.
yeah.
He got cast as Superman during the run of that show. And he came back and said, "My God, I think I got it." So Lanford wrote 5th of July, really for William Hurt and Jeff Daniels and Nancy Snyder. We did that play very successfully. It was quite a success for our summer. And in that play, Uncle Matt is he's a bunch of ashes in a candy box that Aunt Sally is carrying around. And Helen Stenborg was playing Aunt Sally, and she went to Lanford and said, "So tell me what Matt was like, this husband that I'm carrying around his ashes, and they're trying to get her to dispose of them." And Lanford said, "Oh, well, just think of your husband, Barney Hughes." And she said, "Oh, no, Barney won't do at all." And he said, "Well, then think of Judd Hirsch," because Helen had been with Judd Hirsch, of course, in Hot L Baltimore. And so she said, oh, great, that's wonderful. I could definitely use Judd as Matt in my mind. And that started Lanford then to thinking about the young relationship between Aunt Sally and Uncle Matt. And so he wrote Talley's Folly for Judd Hirsch and Trish Hawkins to tell the story of how they met. And then a few years later, he also wrote Talley. Of course, that won the Pulitzer Prize and transferred to Broadway and was a great success for us. Won another New York Drama Critics Circle Award. And several years later, he finished it with the final play of the series was called Talley and Son,
Right.
which Farley Granger appeared in. And all three plays really are a remarkable sort of history of America in small about the Second World War.
We have a beautiful, beautiful clips of 5th of July, which I thought we would play, magnificent ones. And why don't you roll those clips?
Where have you been hiding all afternoon?
Oh, that stupid herb garden's going rank. The lavender's all over the thyme, the angelica's flopping all over the germander. Where are your two friends?
John is showing Gwen his hometown, which should take about 10 minutes.
They came down to see me this afternoon. I was throwing that lavender over my back. Whole garden smells like an English bathhouse. Check it out early. It'll be grown over by noon.
Oh, holy God, you smell terrific.
Well, under that fragrance, I'm as rank as a goat.
Honey, maybe I'll just stay here. Because, I just came here to see Kenny. I didn't bargain for funerals.
No. We'll all go.
Come on, I can't do it. I thought I could because he was so nice, but I'm going to freak out.
No. Come
I
on.
just keep thinking about my daddy and my brother, and I'm going to freak. Tell me it isn't ashes. Tell me it's something else.
Yeah.
Johnny,
Yeah,
make it better.
baby, you're thinking about your old man now. You can't think about him. He's fine.
Try to change the subject. It's not going to work to change the subject. You got to tell me it's something else.
Look, it's pickled peaches. We're gonna go to the river. We're gonna have a little picnic.
Oh, God, no, not something to eat.
That, of course, was starring Jeff Daniels and Richard Thomas and Swoosie Kurtz and Jonathan Hogan. And did I leave
Joyce Reeling.
Joyce Reeling.
Susie went on to win the Tony Award for Best Supporting Actress for that part that had been created by Nancy Snyder, who won the Clarence Derwent Award for when she did it. So, you know, the part of Kenny who was the paraplegic Vietnam vet whose legs had been cut off at above the knee as a result of his war wounds, was originated by William Hurt and then played initially on Broadway by Christopher Reeve, and then Richard Thomas was replacement, I loved all three of them.
Wonderful. I don't know which I liked most.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Jeff Daniels says that Richard Thomas was the best kisser.
Why? This was a magnificent collaboration, collaborative effort, and what did you call the style? Was it a lyrical naturalism, lyrical?
At some point, they tagged us with lyrical realism, and that sort of became the catchword for what Circle Rep did. What we mean by that is that it was, I think what they meant was that our writers wrote with a kind of natural quality that was like real speech, and yet it flowed so eloquently that it lifted it above ordinary speech. Of course, no better example exists of that than As Is, which was my final Tony nomination came when we did As Is and moved it to Broadway. As Is was the first play about AIDS. We just beat out Larry Kramer and The Normal Heart by about a week, I think.
Right.
But they were both being done early on, and our play received great notices and moved to Broadway, and it was a very special time for all of us. Being the first play about AIDS, everybody was terrified of it. We had no idea what it really was. We did a great deal of research, and I know we were afraid to even shake hands with people because we didn't know, whether we could catch the disease or not. And it was a really important play. What blew my mind, Bill, was that you wrote a play right at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic that was so wise and that was so deep and so universal in its application that it's as if this play were written 10 or 20 years after the epidemic began. So you were right, there was a great wisdom in the play that I think changed the world. It's the play, of all the plays I've directed, it's the play I'm most proud to have directed.
Well, thank you, Marsha.
Because it was such an incredible social.
Thank you. I remember our process we moved very quickly, and I came to you with really maybe half of it written and sketches for some of it, and you helped me shape the play, and the final shape of it owes a great deal to you.
Well, thank you. I remember particularly the part about where I first was when I first heard about AIDS, and you went out and interviewed people about that, and it became part of the play, and it was really a very moving, particularly because I think at that point everybody assumed it was to have AIDS you had to be either Haitian, hemophiliac, or homosexual. And in your play you introduced the fact that there were women with AIDS, which nobody had at that point talked about at all. And of course it's become the most serious means of transmission at this point is heterosexual in Africa. And it's it's a scourge that still has not gone away.
No.
But I'm very pleased that we were there at the beginning and awakened some of our country, because our president didn't even use the word AIDS for the 8 years he was in office.
No, he didn't.
It was
He
terrifying.
refused to. We, when I started writing the play, there wasn't even the word AIDS, for that matter.
That's right.
I remember how it galvanized our theater, and it was a remarkable experience. And I later on we worked on another play of mine. This was years later, called Riga.
Yes.
and which I'm still working on, as a matter of fact. But we did a production of it in Los Angeles, and I thought we would show a clip of that production, which was about 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was great.
Why don't we roll it, Jerry?
Riga, December 7th, 1941. Sturmbannführer Rudolf Baitz, Latvian commander leaders Victor Zarais, Redwood Curtain, and Yanis Berzic. The Jews were marched in 10 columns of 1,000 persons each to the forest of Obie. When they arrived, they were told to hand over their valuables. In the 10-degree cold, they were told to strip. And then they had to run through a gauntlet of rifle butts, whips, and barking dogs until they stood at the edge of a large pit. And then the women were told to hold their babies on their shoulders. But first, a word from our sponsor, the Swiss Bank Corporation. Your lady, Ricola. So that's see? Huh? You don't appreciate Jewish humor? I'm only doing what you asked me to do.
You have to move on.
Just get over it.
You can't bring them back.
Boyfriend, I'm trying to get over it.
What are you doing now? You went to, after you left New York and you taught at Arizona State University.
Well, I first went to Los Angeles, where I tried for 8 long years to try to make films. I had, in the meantime, done the very successful Broadway hit of Lanford's play Burn This, starring John Malkovich and Joan Allen. Joan won the Tony Award for Best Actress. And it was like, you know, an extraordinary performance by Malkovich, one of the great performances of our time. And it seemed like a logical thing to make that into a movie. I eventually wrote a screenplay with Lanford, and I spent, in the 8 long years that I was in LA, that was the last straw, as it were, because I went out there to work on a book called The Front Runner, which was, had been, Paul Newman was going to do it at one point, and then they dropped it. Then I got involved to direct it, and I worked for 5 years trying to get that film made. But the homophobia in Hollywood was so great at the time, we could not get a star to play it.
Right.
And so that fell through, and then a whole series of others fell through. Finally, Burn This was just on the verge of being made. Wonderful producers who had produced The Big Chill and Dead Poets Society had optioned it, and we had Linda Linda, oh God, what is her name, from T2, Linda Hamilton, thank you. Linda Hamilton and Nicolas Cage.
Oh my God.
And it would have been a great film, but it was one of those Hollywood deals where the foreign distributors didn't like him and the domestic distributors didn't like her, so it didn't get made. So at that point, I went I was desperate, so I went to Arizona State University and became a teacher. I never thought in my life that I would ever teach. And it was really, really hard because I don't think I'm particularly gifted as a teacher. But I stayed there for 10 years and I learned a great deal. And during that time, I also took a short gig as a critic for a little local newspaper called The New Times. And in writing criticism for the theater, which my mentor Harold Clurman had done, and I tried to follow in his steps, that's where I learned something about writing, which enabled me to really finish this long-term project of my book, Creating Life on Stage, a director's approach to working with actors.
I'm really looking forward to reading it, Marsha. If you could summarize in a very, very short manner, what is your philosophy of directing?
Well, I believe that the director is responsible for taking the two-dimensional words on a page that is described by the author and bringing it to life through the actors so that the play really lives. Harold Clurman called the true play is the living experience of the play, that the audience experiences totally as if it were really happening, and they take it home with them. And once you experience a live play on stage that's really, really lived and fully executed, it's impossible to forget it.
It feels to me like we just began talking moments ago, and they're giving me the high sign that we have to wind up. I'm terribly sorry, because I could talk with you for hours. We have to stop here. It's been a great pleasure to reconnect with you today. Thank you, Marshall W. Mason, and our home and studio audiences for joining us. And we hope to see you again soon for further conversations. Thanks, Marshall.
Thanks for having me.